Ahmed asked a question. He said, "Hi Martin, I have a bit of an issue with my Form 888. My sister-in-law didn't follow the exact instructions for filling out the form. I advised her to get the documents witnessed by a JP, but instead she got her partner, who happens to be a doctor, medical practitioner, witnessed it for her, but also didn't certify the attached Australian citizenship to it. My question is, in your opinion, does that invalidate the Form 888 and therefore I cannot use it in my application?" So basically, my answer to this question is broken into two sections. There's two separate topics here. Firstly, it is who can witness the Form 888 signature, okay, which is it's a Commonwealth statutory declaration form, and it tells you firstly is who can witness a statutory declaration in Australia. The form specifically outlines who can. Okay, so as long as they're one of these people or hold this type of qualification or are classified under one of these occupations, they are eligible to witness the signature of whoever it is that's declaring. Okay, so signature of, let's say, your mum, your dad, your brother, your friend, your colleague, whoever's completing the Form 888, and then that qualified person's signature, the witness's signature, goes here. Okay, and this signature needs to be from someone who is on this list. Now, to Ahmed's scenario, the Form 888 was witnessed by a medical doctor. I mean, related to the person who was making the declaration, but that's fine. There's not an issue in relation to being related. So therefore, the Form 888 to me seems to have been witnessed correctly, given that it was a doctor or medical practitioner that witnessed the signature. Okay, so who was the qualified person? But he mentioned that they didn't attach a certified copy of the Australian citizenship to it, which is the second half of that process. You know, the first requirement is that it's properly witnessed by a qualified person, and then you do want to attach certified copies of the person's ID. You know, and again, that's all stipulated. It's all outlined in the Form 888. So you're really just following what the form asks you to do. Okay, and the form asks you somewhere here. I can't recall exactly where, but somewhere on the form, it mentions you want to attach certified copy of the person's ID to the Form 888, as in the person making the declaration. So whoever it is, your mother, your cousin, your friend, whoever it is that's making this declaration, you want to attach a certified copy of that person's ID and proof that they're an Australian citizen. You know, if you're trying to give them statements from Australian citizens, you want to provide proof of that person's citizenship. So it's not necessarily that it would invalidate the Form 888. There's nothing in law, in the migration regulations or the Migration Act, or even government policy that specifically says the Form 888 would be invalidated if you don't attach a copy of that person's ID, but it may just not be taken into consideration. You know, and unfortunately we don't know. Ultimately, you don't know if a case officer will consider that Form 888 or not consider that Form 888 if it isn't properly witnessed and if it doesn't have the required identity documentation and citizenship documents, you know, to it. So really, you want to follow that Form 888 as best as you can in terms of what it states to ensure that it's considered. Okay, but it doesn't mean it's invalidated if you don't. And also, just to clarify, you know, Form 888s can be completed by non-Australian citizens and permanent residents. People overseas can complete Form 888s, and again, that is all mentioned and explained here. Okay, so if you are not an Australian citizen or permanent resident and you reside outside Australia, your statement cannot be considered a statutory declaration, but it can still be considered a statement. Okay, so arguably, people overseas that are not Australian citizens and not permanent residents and providing supporting statements, they can use Form 888s. I say this all the time when I talk to clients and other Veazy users, but it's just not going to be considered a stat dec. So arguably it may not hold as much weight as someone who is an Australian citizen or permanent resident providing Form 888s. You know, if I were to draw this, just get the camera in focus. If we're talking about supporting statements from friends and family, what I like to explain is it's like a pyramid, okay? That triangle all there. And let's say on this half is the applicant, and on this half is the sponsor. Now, ideally what you want is you want supporting statements from both sides. You want supporting statements from the applicant side and from the sponsor side. At the top of the pyramid, ideally you want statements from those closest to the couple. And typically that's going to be their family, commonly speaking. So immediate family members, parents, siblings, immediate family. Then we have, let's say, extended family. And let's say, friends, mutual friends, colleagues, okay? In terms of what I would say is most weighted or most heavily weighted, statements from people that know the couple intimately, and that's generally going to be their immediate family members, and then working down to extended family and then friends. In terms of weight, right? This isn't an official pyramid. This is our take on it, okay? The government won't corroborate my position, my opinion on this. This is just based off what we think is best practice in who you want to get supporting statements from, okay? Now, typically speaking, because the applicant obviously isn't from Australia, most of their side of the statements will be from people that probably aren't in Australia, so the people overseas. Now, if people overseas are providing supporting statements, that's fine, and they can complete Form 888s because the Form 888 specifies this. Form 888 tells you that you can still complete a Form 888 if you're overseas. If your family member's overseas, they can still complete a Form 888. But it just won't be considered a stat deck. So let's use a bit of an icon in terms of what's going to be like a strength multiplier. Let's use it's meant to be a lightning rod, okay, for a power multiplier. Statements from citizens and permanent residents may hold a little bit more weight because they're written by Australians and permanent residents, and the government may trust and believe those statements more than statements made by people overseas that are not Australians or permanent residents. But if you do have family overseas that are not citizens or permanent residents, you still want statements from them. You still want to tick these boxes, and they can still complete Form 888s. But often what I recommend is that you use, or they use, whatever the official statutory declaration form is according to their country, where they reside. So if your parents are in the UK or India or Canada or Vietnam or China, that each country, each jurisdiction is going to have its own comparable equivalent version alternative to a stat deck. Stat deck is an Australian term. There's going to be official declaration forms in those countries, and I just say, look, make sure they write their statements on that form. What you want to do though is you want to ensure that they follow the format of the Form 888. So if they're writing their UK stat deck, you want them to say who they are, where they live, what their occupation is, their contact details, who the visa applicant is, who the sponsor is, and then answer these questions. Specifically write sets, paragraphs that mirror how this Form 888 is split and structured. You want it to be signed, and you want it to be witnessed according to whoever is a qualified person to witness the signature of that form in that country. And you still want to attach a certified copy of that person's ID to their statement. So I just wanted to, I suppose, give a well-rounded answer to Form 888s and witnessing requirements and statements from people overseas. These are things that I talk about a lot when it comes to our client cases and also to our visa users in trying to guide them. And this is generally a metaphor that I use. This is the pyramid. You want to try to focus on statements from up to top, work your way down from both sides. Consider the strength multiplier of statements from citizens and permanent residents, and understand that people overseas can still complete Form 888s, but I think it's easier for them to write their statements using whatever the appropriate form is over there in that country. And if that's not in English, that's fine. You just get it translated. If it's an offshore application, you can get it translated by whoever's authorized to translate documentation in that country. If it's an onshore partner visa application, you want to get it translated by a NATI accredited translator.